So, welcome back to season 2 of Legal Tech Briefs. I'm your host, Zach Posner, and joining me today are two incredible leaders who sit right at the intersection of law, innovation, and business. First up, we have Karina, who's the CEO and co-founder of Grovie AI. She's a partner at Caldera Law, and joining her is David, who's the corporate attorney, a legal technologist, and the chair of the technology committee at Fennemore. Both Karina and David are not only pioneers in their fields, but they are also key voices on the advisory board of the TLTF Summit, which is helping to shape the future of our entire ecosystem. I couldn't be more excited to dig into the conversation with two people who are thinking about what's next in legal tech. So with that, let's kind of dive into it. Personally excited about today because we're diving into a topic that is incredibly relevant and often overlooked in the legal innovation conversation. And that's like how small and mid-sized law firms can lead the way in transforming how legal services are delivered. What we are seeing is you don't need a massive budgets. You don't need hundreds of lawyers to innovate. And our guests today are kind of proof of that. Both of them have driven change within their own teams, utilizing technology, creativity, and strategic thinking to deliver greater value to their clients. We want to unpack what innovation looks like in these environments, the challenges, the wins, and practical steps, and then where things are going in general. So if you're a GC listening in, an attorney, a founder, or just someone curious, that's what this conversation is about for you today. So first off, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Great to see you both.
Yeah, very excited to be here.
Maybe I'll jump in and just ask this question because I think we're in the middle of something that's evolving. What's hype versus real in AI in the legal world today? Like what you guys are seeing. Somebody, AI, artificial intelligence, and somebody on the team was telling me, well, is it artificial or is it actually? So, curious, like where you think we're at in this journey. We've seen a lot of stuff since November 30th, 22, when ChatGPT came out, but how y'all feeling about where we are today?
I'll go first. So I mean this in the best possible way. Hype would be alternative fee arrangements. And that's from someone who, my job as chair of Fennemore Labs is to drive alternative fee arrangements for our firm. I think it won't be hype in 6 months or 6 years. I'm not sure where it's going to land in between those two timeframes. And we're working hard. Like we have a policy document on how to implement AFAs. But what's super challenging about AFAs right now is you have to find the right tech, the right use case, the right attorney, and the right client to use them with. And then you also have to find the right compensation structure within the law firm, which is where I think smaller firms probably have an advantage because they have a little more control over that portion of it. Whereas at Fennemore, we have 350 attorneys. We're an AmLaw 200 firm. So the comp structure is very good. It's transparent. I like it, but it's not built for alternative fee arrangements. And we're working hard to solve that problem. And I think we will solve that problem. I think we're further along than most. But at the moment, it's hard to materialize it at scale. So I think AFAs right now are a bit of hype, but that doesn't mean you should ignore them. I think you have to dig deep, and we're working hard on it. And I'll tell you, it is hard work. So that's probably my take on hype right now.
That's actually fascinating because like the lens that you use, like most people think about AFAs and they think about or like we think about technology all day long and how that can be flipped into an AFA, but you need all of those parties to come together. You need the client, you need the attorney, and you need the technology it's kind of a 3-part dance. And without any of them, it's problematic.
Yeah, I think I would take a similar view from the lens of efficiency. I think there's a lot of hype around the efficiency that we're seeing from AI, particularly from complex areas of law, like M&A, tax, litigation, complex real estate. Those are the topics that meet my office here. And we have used technology and we're using it and embracing it, but we're not creating efficiencies yet. There's sometimes this notion of like you have to take, kind of 2 steps backwards before you take 1 step forward with the AI. And there's some training that's still happening. And so for us, the efficiency hasn't really translated into improved profitability. I think that will come with time, to David's point. And we're definitely playing the long game there. But even before we get to that AFA, right, we need to create efficiencies. And I think there's a lot of hype around the efficiencies that are being created right now from the client service, the client delivery aspect. I think the back of the house, there's real efficiencies and gains that we've already seen.
So I'm debating if we should zoom in or zoom out. Maybe like Karina, when you think of innovation and how this stuff gets adopted or even like culture, like what does all this mean for a small firm? How do you think about like introducing these constructs in, and what are the most
Yeah.
important elements to kind of accelerate some of this stuff?
I think the biggest element for our firm, our size firm, with the complex clients that we have and matters that we deal with is trust. And if we can't get over the hurdle of trusting and being able to rely on the technology, I lose a lot of my leaders. And I think there's still some skepticism around how much can we really trust the technology to be a participant in our workflows.
Yeah, maybe both of you, like,
Mhm.
I guess the end goal is for legal teams to be more strategic partners with your businesses that you guys work with and your clients. How does that construct change? I mean, does technology do some of the blocking and the tackling over time, or like, how do you think these roles change over time? Or how does all this stuff enable you to become closer to your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great vendors that we have on board now are helping us get closer to our clients because they are listening to us and they're adapting their technology to problems that we see. The tech vendors usually, have a good idea of what the problem is, but they may not understand some of the nuances. And so it's
Mhm.
really helpful when you have a tech vendor who can work with you to understand those nuances and then help provide a solution. To Karina's point, we still have to go back and double check everything. So we're not seeing the efficiency gains that we can pass on to our clients just yet because it may save us 80% of the time in the first run, but we still have to go back and do it the old way. So we're spending, 120% of the time that we used to spend on a matter just to verify the output's correct, right? So I think that the time will come where we get comfortable with these solutions and we are able to pass on some of those savings to clients, and working with tech vendors who are willing to adapt to you, which is, an interesting value add for both the tech vendor and for us because they're getting enriched by finding better product market fit, and we're obviously benefiting from getting a more efficient tech solution. So it's a symbiotic relationship, but it does require a little work on both parties' side to make it work well.
And how much do you think about when you bring this, when you're looking at tech? I mean, are you intentionally saying no to a lot of things just because the teams can only handle so much at once, and you can only go to 120%, you can't go to 180%? Like, I'm curious, David, how you think about like because you see all this stuff like we do, and I know you're personally interested in this. Like, how do you weigh that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a real problem with bandwidth. I mean, I'm a practicing attorney like Karina, right? And we're interested in the space. So we spend a lot of extra time on this that's not billable. But most attorneys aren't wired this way, right? Most
Mhm.
attorneys are, doing work for their clients. They're doing it very well, and they don't have a lot of extra time. So with the Fennemore Labs Committee, which is all working attorneys, and with the many working groups that we have that are focused on specific practice area solutions, they're all working attorneys. And what we don't want to do is burn them out with a whole bunch of vendor demos. So, I do those demos. Some of the other labs committee members do the demos. We try to screen out and really just bring the best of the best to our working attorneys and then go through a proof of concept with them. But there is a limited amount of bandwidth that we have
Mhm.
to utilize here. So we have to be very careful not to burn them out by bringing them in too early. And so these vendors that we're working with right now that we have contracts with, we started talking to them 2 years ago, and we've been working with them, really vetting them, going through a process of due diligence, and then bringing on board. And now we have these products that we're working with. But again, it's been a 2-year journey to get here.
Do you think, I'm curious, Karina, do you think it's easier at a smaller shop to introduce technology, or do you think David's got it easier? Or how do you, or
I
different set of challenges?
I think the decision-making process to get to the technology stack is easier because you have less of that red tape. I do think that the implementation and then even the integration into the culture is harder, because we operate mainly by consensus. So we need everyone to understand, to be on board. And then the other issue, and David and I have talked about this offline at length, is we don't have a dedicated resource whose sole responsibility it is to integrate the technology and create a culture around it to optimize that technology. So we are very much reliant on the customer success agents that are part of our vendors to help us create that culture and identify the use cases. And oftentimes the technology will fall flat if we don't have that connective tissue with the vendor. And it's mainly because we don't have somebody that is thinking and breathing this full time within the firm, because we don't have that budget. We're very lean in terms of our operations.
I'm curious, the basic, do you run into the buy versus build types of questions at small firms? Like how do you, or Karina, and then at the bigger one, David, like how do you think about that as well?
We definitely do, and that's really the genesis of Grovie AI, and where Grovie kind of was born was the idea of we are at the center of the AI revolution in our industry, and we wanted to have a seat at the table and a voice, and we felt very strongly that our position as attorneys and subject matter experts gave us an edge to be able to have an opinion on how to deliver legal services to clients in a more efficient way that leveraged AI. I think it's difficult, and you probably know this from all of your founders and all your portfolio companies. Building technology from scratch is a very, very challenging feat, and hats off to everybody who's doing it right now. I think as a small law firm, you have to be very entrepreneurial to take that bet. We are entrepreneurial. Otherwise, you're really in that buy kind of category, and that is not a bad place to be. I think there's incredible technology out there that could, overnight start adding value to your firm. It's just about your appetite and what role you want to play.
Yeah, David, here's.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing both, and I think it's appropriate. We're buying from select vendors that we vetted where they have products that we know can solve client problems right now, and that's appropriate for us. We don't, we're not going to build everything, but where we build is, proprietary things. For example, we have Dot, which is a GPT powered connector. So instead of sending out a pardon the interruption email to all 350 attorneys, like, hey, do you know an attorney that specializes in X? We can just go to Dot and say, I need an attorney that specializes in X. Please tell me who we have that does that. And then it gives you a list of attorneys with qualifications and so forth. And then we're going to expand that to connect to other proprietary systems inside. So that's a good example of a build, right? And I think, building is allowing you to differentiate from your competitors, which is important. Buying is, kind of like staying up with the competitors. It's important to do. And it's interesting now, like, I think you look at Harvey, which has apparently dominated the MLaw 100. And so what's going to be interesting to see is, do those firms that all have Harvey, are they competing on a level playing field, or are some of them going to be able to use it in a different way that gives them an advantage? Or is that just baseline table stakes now, and then you have to add point solutions to really differentiate yourself? Yeah, it's a fascinating time to be a lawyer and to be in this space. So very exciting.
I am, I think we're seeing a technology doubling like every 7 months type of play right now. And I think that the most important thing is not how aggressive you are today, but it's more like the culture of the firm.
Mhm.
And like, are you, and almost like the culture of the leadership, like, are they personally curious about this, even if they're experimenting in their, in their personal lives with, you know what I mean? Or do they use these things for little things here and there? It's just like, to me, it's about understanding the power of, so as the tech gets better, as these becomes more reliable, but I'm curious, like, how important you think that cultural piece is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably where it all starts. And the culture has to come from the top.
Yeah.
And I think even as a recruiting mechanism, right? As we onboard junior talent, like that is a question that we get from every potential candidates. Like, how are you using AI? What is your strategy on AI? What do your clients think about AI? So for us, we know that it's already kind of part of our industry, and we are embracing it, but it's definitely something that it needs to trickle down from the top. Um, and I think, David, we've had this conversation. I think you would agree.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I give a lot of credit to our management committee and especially James Goodnow, our CEO. I mean, he's, I think, the youngest CEO of an AmLaw 200 firm. He uses the technology. He's very much an advocate for it. At our firm retreat, it was mostly about AI. And so that, management level commitment really does drive a lot of change. And then combined with that, you also have to have sort of the grassroots, which is where I think the Fennemore Labs committee and the working groups come in, where attorneys have to be willing to dedicate some time to try to learn this themselves and apply it to real client situations. And you have to have both. I think you can't just have the management leading without the grassroots piece, and you can't have the grassroots piece without the management leading as well. So you need to have both. And especially when you start to look at law firm demographics, I think, most of the attorneys who are 65 plus or so aren't that interested, and understandably so. Their careers are going great, and they're, not seeing a big impact for the remainder of their career. And then 45 to 65, you have sort of, these middle-aged attorneys who are looking at it and thinking, okay, I am interested in learning about it, but I've got my hands full here with life and with being a lawyer. And then from 25 to 45, you're really just kind of building a book and trying to learn how to practice, and you're following the lead of those older attorneys for the most part. So it's very understandable that you don't get 100% commitment from lawyers in the law firm. But without that management piece leading the effort and setting the tone, it's going to be almost impossible to get the grassroots movement to work as well. So I think you have to have both, really.
Okay, I have two more questions about smaller firms, but I want to actually ask something in between. And I want to ask you guys to like step out of your current role. So like neither of you work for your current employer for this next question. You love when they start with this. What is the profile of a firm that you think is like best positioned to be the tech-enabled firm of the future? Do you believe this is a two-person shop, a 20-person, a 200, an AM Law #1? Like, and why? And I have my belief, or I'll give you my beliefs. Like, I believe that it's somewhere, maybe it's like a 10 attorney shop that goes like really and maybe it's the people, maybe David, it's the people at that the earlier stage of that mid life transition or whatever you called that, like the people that are busy with like there's enough client work, but they're also curious about technology. And it's like I look at some of these folks and I'm like, wow, they have if they would go all in on this stuff, and that enables like a 10 attorney shop to act like a 50 attorney shop or something. And then they have the capacity to become like renowned experts in one specific vertical. I don't think it works at the generalist level, but I think like if you are a real estate and all you do is commercial real estate leases, and you can go and find a couple tools to stitch, and maybe you do a little bit of what you were describing, David. You find some big tools and you stitch them together internally in some capacity. Anyway, that's my belief, but I could be.
You took the words out of my mouth, Zach, in terms of having that narrow focus, right? I think what's been challenging for us is we are very much cross-disciplinary. So we have corporate real estate litigation, IP, and we're very much geographically constrained to a certain extent as well. If you have a small firm in one specific area of law that has national reach, I think that's the sweet spot, right? We are somewhat geographically constrained for a lot of our practice areas, so there is kind of like that cap. But there are very interesting areas of law that are more susceptible to scale and growth with AI. And probably immigration is one of them. I think family law is a big one. I think real estate is a big one. Very basic corporate, but in narrow focus.
Yeah, David, curious thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if the question is, what do I think the ideal law firm setup would be, 5 to 10 years from now, I think it would have to be your traditional law firm with probably a subsidiary that's an alternative business structure that can, share fees with technologists, and also a SaaS company that is constantly innovating and developing software solutions that can feed both the law firm and the ABS. I think that's a super powerful combination, and it's really necessary with the way that technology is ramping up. I'm also adjunct professor at ASU, where I teach a class on blockchain and cryptocurrency. I think with the Genius Act and stablecoins, smart contracts, tokenization of other assets, you're going to see changes that are very rapid in the next 5 to 10 years, where AI and digital assets are going to really change the way contract law works and contracts are enforced. So I think you're going to need a pretty deep bench, and I think you'll need a SaaS company in your pocket, as well as a potential ABS and a traditional law firm if you want global domination. So that's what I think you need.
All right, let's do just one more question because of time, and let's go the opposite of global domination. One small step you both would recommend for pretend it's a smaller law firm and a practitioner's watching this in a little bit, and they're like, what's one simple thing that we can do to move in the right direction? Go for it, Karina.
Apply to attend the Legal Tech Fund Summit in a few months. get a front row seat to everything that's happening in our industry. It's one of the best events I've been to in recent history. But I think, sorry, I dropped my AirPod. Immersing yourself in what's happening. Subscribing to the newsletters, following the right people on LinkedIn, joining the different conversations that are happening in different communities, with your bar association, whatever it may be. But start to immerse yourself into the community and maybe get rid of that denial, right? It's happening, right? The billable hour is dead. It's just, we're not exactly there yet, but we'll be there very soon. So there's no point in kind of like burying our head in the sand anymore.
David? And by the way,
Yeah.
I love that concept. Show me. Yeah.
Hard to top that, but
Yeah.
I think the one thing I would just say is try to find some client value and connect to a client that's willing to, entertain an alternative fee arrangement and you using technology to service their need. That's a hard thing to do, but if you can do that, even, at a small scale, like reviewing an NDA, then you're on your path, because the only way this is really going to work is if you can prove to your client that it has value to them, and then you can actually earn a fee from it, right? So start small, find something that works, find a client that you're comfortable taking a risk with, and go through that process, and then just iterate from there. I think you have to start somewhere. So find some task that you think you can automate, and then work with a client to really test it and see how it works. But it does require sort of a scientific approach and testing these things out. And I think you just have to get comfortable, going through that process. And that's going to be foreign to a lot of lawyers, but I think it's an important part of starting in this process.
Awesome. Well, I thank you both so much for spending a few minutes with us. And I think on behalf of everybody listening, thank you guys for sharing some insights, and looking forward to seeing you both in November at the TLTF Summit.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Great to see you both.
Yeah. Thank you, Zach. Good to see you, Karina. Take care.
Thanks.